What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. First up, I got a voicemail on the Bingos line from Len, friend and contributor to Bingo Row at York every year.
Hello, Nick. Hey, I have a yacht club here. Here's my question. The ball return. If I shoot the ball up and let's say it goes through the ball return, you'll get another ball, shoot it up, ball return. And if you do that 3 times in a row, the selection now will lock even though I don't have any balls in the hole. Now, I play the gay time, it's exactly the opposite. I can shoot as many balls into the ball return until up to I shoot the 4th ball, then I'm locked in. So I guess the question is the yacht club working right? It may seem like a simple problem. Looking at the schematic, there's not much to really go off of, so I think the yacht club's working right. But then again, you would know. Thanks, Nick. Hope to hear from you soon. Take care. Bye.
So for Len and anybody who else might be listening, I checked over the circuit last night and totally missed something obvious here. Trough switch number 4 is in line with the selector lock relay, and that trough switch is what is controlling the selection ability on Yacht Club. So I would suggest checking trough number 4 carefully. The only other things that are in the circuit of note are the timer itself, and that's stepping, and a normally closed switch on the selector lock relay itself, which is opening appropriately, or the coil would fry. So on bingo trough switches, there is a metal spacer, which can sometimes be wedged outside of the switch, especially if a particularly hard ball strike hits it, or if someone's been messing with the trough, in order to clean the switches or repair something, and inadvertently does it. I'm certainly guilty of that. So I'd suggest concentrating my efforts there, as that makes the most sense. Now, thanks for my change of heart goes to Jeff Lawton, the man who wrote the bingo book. I contacted him because the trough switch is drawn in the schematic as being normally closed, and for whatever reason, that caused me to just close my eyes and look past it. But he set me straight. So thanks to Jeff, and thanks, Len, for the interesting question. Next up, have you heard Coast to Coast Pinball's newest offering? He is taking the tapes that Roger Sharpe recorded for his book Pinball that was written in the 1970s. These are interviews with electromechanical luminaries, and he is releasing them in podcast form. I think this is extremely cool and really great. The first episode focuses on Harry Williams, and unfortunately they're in a crowded cafeteria, but Nate has really done a tremendous amount of work to the audio to make it listenable. I'm very impressed, and I can't wait to hear more. Do yourself a favor if you enjoy electromechanical games, and seek out that podcast. It's Coast to Coast Pinball. That's the feed that it features under. Next, more work continues on multi-races. I did some woodwork this past weekend and routed out the buttonholes that are necessary for the footrail controls that I'm going to be adding to multi-races. There are going to be a total of 6 buttons in that footrail area, 1 to play all features, 1 for extra balls, 1 for odds only, 1 for doubles only, 1 to light the feature flag, and then 1 to change your selection. So that took me a while. I'd never used a router before, and thanks to Ken from Texas, who gave me a tip to try a handheld router from Harbor Freight, and it was, in fact, inexpensive. I spent quite a bit more on the bits, and I'm pretty glad that I did. Those had no problem whatsoever, but the router itself, very cheap. But it worked for me. So I only had 1 shot to do it, and I only made a couple of mistakes, which isn't that bad considering that it was essentially my first time using this for anything of real consequence. I routed out a couple of other items for multi-races. The back door, I routed out a channel so that it would fit in a little locking area, and routed out some channels for the locks, the back box locks to install. That went fine. So I decided to get crazy and start cutting some more holes in wood that I couldn't replace. And luckily it worked out. So I'm going to be installing restrictor plates on top of the buttons. Those help guide the button and also help prevent a enterprising person from pulling the button out of the hole. The buttons I found on Turf King, at least, have no springs, which I was a bit surprised to learn. Every bingo control has a spring, so these of course predate the bingos, but the way they work is that there is a spoon switch underneath of it, and that spoon has a blade stiffener behind it, and that is the means by which the buttons actually return to the appropriate height after you press them. I never would have guessed that. I think it's kind of cool that they do it that way. It's definitely a lot simpler, cuts out one extra piece per button, and there's no real need for a restrictor plate underneath the buttons because of that. Now, they have them, and that's to prevent people from, yanking on the button so hard that they rip them up through, I guess, and perhaps also to hide any holes if there were any mistakes in routing out the control panel in the first place. But at any rate, that's done, and the holes are there, so now I just need to populate with buttons. I have 4 out of 6 original buttons, which I'm going to use. The last 2, I'm going to have to substitute bingo buttons, and a big thank you to Jim Holder, bingo collector in Pennsylvania, who's also a big part of Bingo Row every year. He has provided me with some old lock bars for bingos, magic screens that have very worn left and right buttons, and I'll be able to repurpose those for now until I can find originals to slot in place. So preparations for York are in full swing, and I should have more to announce on that front soon. I'm working on something which I think is pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to bringing it to the show. I'm also working on a super secret special project, which I may or may not have finished in time for York, but I should have it finished in time for next year. So today's featured game is Gottlieb's 1939 Kina Ball. This is a very interesting game I just saw come up, and it has a very bingo-esque back glass. There are 2 different bingo cards, and the numbers 1 through 7 are posted on the first card, marked A, and the numbers 4 through 10 are marked on card B. At the launch of each ball, the ball can go one of a few different ways. There are 2 sets of lanes at the top, 2 on the left and 2 on the right, which allow you to choose either A or B, the card A or B. It will also light up the A or B on the back glass. This is important later on. And then the series of bumpers that progresses from there is set up in a fairly difficult or confusing pattern. But in the center of the game, there are 3 different bumpers and 1 ball return hole. Or I assume it's a ball return hole. It might be blocked underneath, but it is not labeled like a gobble hole. At any rate, each of these things will award you 1 skill point. The neat thing about the skill points is that they're a carryover feature, and from the factory, once every 30 skill points, you win a replay. So even if you're a terrible player like myself, eventually they'll throw you a bone. But the main goal is to light up 1 entire bingo card and then make sure that you have the appropriate letter lit as well, A or B. I think this game looks like a ton of fun. It's a flipperless game with a fairly unique concept between the bingo cards and the skill points which accrue otherwise. So this is one that is now on my list, and I'll be looking for a nice one here one of these days. At any rate, thank you very much for listening. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, or you can call me on the Bingos line, 724-BINGOS1. That's 724-246-4671. You can listen to me on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter at Bingo Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Bingo Podcast, or you can listen to me on my website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.